circular hickeys have to do with helping athletes win the Olympics? And could reading really add years to your life? That's part of today's Medical Hot Topics. Welcome back, chiropractor Dr. Tony DeRamus, head and neck surgeon Dr. Erich Sturgis, optometrist Dr. Julio Arroyo, general surgeon Dr. McBath, and wellness and aesthetic specialist Dr. Shel. All right, here we go. So this thing cupping, we saw, like, you know, Michael Phelps, and several other swimmers had all these, like, look like circular hickeys all over their body. But it's called cupping. So what does cupping do, and should I be doing it?
Well, you know, cupping has been around for a very, very long time.
Yeah, like 1,000 years.
Well, some people say it dates back to 3000 BC.
Oh, wow.
In medical literature, it was there in 1550 BC. So I think it stood the test of time. But we, 4 years ago, we saw the same thing with the taping. And so Google now is, I think there's a 3,200% increase in the searches for cupping. But basically what cupping does is essentially is a sucking cup that will pull the skin to a certain degree, stretch the capillaries, which is where the blood flow is.
Which makes the marks.
Yes, the hickey. And sometimes we'll break the capillary. But basically the basic premise behind that is to increase blood flow to an area. And with this new blood, you have the nutrients that come in with it, the oxygen, all this stuff that
more energy.
Recovery. Well, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to cupping. Relaxation is there. I mean, you can get into the chi, the energy flow, and so forth. But I think from a sports perspective, recovery, it definitely works. We see a lot of other therapies like cryotherapy. The premise behind that is to increase blood flow for healing as well.
Well, I wish I had known that when I was in high school. I could have said, Mom, no, it was to... No. It's medicinal.
That's a rather large
Okay. There's one of the Olympic athletes. Of course, we know they test them to make sure they're not doping and doing other things like that. But one in particular, a sprinter, DeRamus, had qualified for the Olympics, but at first they were going to say no because she has hyperandrogenism and she had high levels of testosterone. And we know testosterone can boost performance.
Yes.
And so they thought that she may have been doping. It turns out that's just what her body does.
Exactly. So we all have natural levels of the different hormones, as we know. Women, too, need their testosterone, and they have good, solid levels of testosterone that's important for their function, whether it be muscle mass or performance or libido or just cognitive function, and so do men need it. So we all need to kind of know what our hormonal status is, and we all need to enhance it to the optimal levels, not go over the optimal levels. But when it comes to sports and performance, I really believe that's the way you're naturally born, and a lot of men will have good, high, solid levels of testosterone, and then I see some men in their 40s that may have very low testosterone and are not functioning well. So it's all about, using your hormonal balance to your best abilities, and it's natural.
As an athlete, but for her, it was natural. She wasn't doing anything extra. It's just what her, but you lucky girl, is what her body does there. All right. Cancer survivors are more prone to obesity, especially certain types. Prostate, colorectal, breast cancer survivors, the whole bit. We touched on it a little bit earlier, Dr. McBath, how there is that correlation between fat and cancer. Why?
Well, and there's a lot of treatment these days that's targeted toward the estrogens, androgens, things like that in people's recovery. And when you take an anti-estrogen or an anti-androgen, it's going to throw your body off. We tell patients a lot of times you're going to expect to gain 10 to 15 pounds with this treatment. Nobody wants to be dieting when you're getting chemotherapy anyway. Right. So by the time you're done and all healed up and hopefully not going to regress, then it's time to worry about that weight. But in the meantime, just, take care of yourself first.
Right. Yeah, and Dr. Sturgis says that correlation between cancer sits in fat.
Well, I don't know about
but
certainly we know that obesity puts people at risk for certain types of cancer, and that's clear, and it's an emerging, an emerging problem in the country, and liver cancer in particular, something that's growing at rapid rates in our country, is linked to the rising rates of obesity in our country. So, as a cancer preventive issue, we need to work on our weight in this country in particular. We typically see in some cancers, weight loss after treatment. We talked about chemotherapy. Some of these treatments or radiotherapy can be quite severe, and we do have the other end of the story of people that lose quite a bit of weight after their treatment.
All right. There's another study that says high levels of toxic chemicals in drinking water over 6 million drinking water of 6 million Americans. PFAS found in the water. And Dr. Arroyo, we know that there are so many things you were touching on earlier that kind of attack our body daily.
Talk about fluoride. You can Google fluoride. And see that it's one of the most toxic elements, in the whole chemical table, and that's put on purpose on water, supposedly to avoid bacteria in the water and microorganisms that could make us sick. fluoride is a bad thing for you for starters. But of course, talk about all the antibiotics dumped into the system, pesticides and cleaners, et cetera, et cetera. It's crazy. So you better, filter your water real well. You want to drink, the water we have right now.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important to realize we're constantly exposed to toxic chemicals. And so, in fact, when we do heavy metal toxicity testing in our office, you would be amazed at how many toxic chemicals we see in people's bloodstreams. And so we have to go with...
We're amazed when we get the test and you go, really?
Absolutely.
Where did that come from? I didn't eat any of that.
And then that's why chelation comes up. And then, you chelate these chemicals out of your body and the heavy metal toxicities.
All right. This next one says, because the study was only observational. Okay, so it's not like a real study. All right. Could being a bookworm help you live longer? And they said that book readers lived an average of 2 years longer than non-book readers.
My first impression with this one was that, my gosh, book reading is a sedentary thing, so we need movement to be healthy. But when you look at the study and break this down, what they found is that most of the reading group were women, they were affluent, they were educated, they were actually healthy. So those are all components that make us healthy anyway. So I think the study, I'm not telling people not to read. Obviously, we need to read.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's...
I think it depends on what you're reading. If you're reading like a little fantasy that kind of takes you away for a while, like 50 Shades of Grey, then you're like, you come out, you're like, I'm happy. Hi, honey, get over here. Right?
As a parent, too, isn't it a great study to share with your kids? I was sharing the study with my kids last night, and I said, hey, this is a great reason to start reading much more. You'll live longer.
All right, well, there you go. You use everything you got. Okay, we'll be right back.
I'm Brad.